Okay, Shmuel, you are live on the air. Go ahead. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, so my question is, I've read over the years that Paul was actually a spy for the rabbis who deliberately sabotaged the Christian religion to make it unpalatable for the Jews, and so that the non-Jews should take it, and the sectarians of the Jewish sects that were following that early Christianity would go away from it and see that it wasn't for them.
That certainly would have been a good plan. Rabbi, what do you think? Go ahead and hang up now, Tony, for your answer. Thank you for your call.
There is a legend that's similar to that, but there are some very striking differences. So the legend is not about Paul, although very frequently people make that mistake. Now, I want to be very clear. This is a legend. Is it historical? I have no idea. Are there some sources for it? Yes, very little, but there are some sources for the legend. So I would say that this should be regarded as a legend, but a strong legend. It's like a stronger legend because there are some sources for it, not a lot. But it's not about Paul. Paul would never do anything like this. It was very much about Peter. Now, the reason people think it was Paul is because, well, first of all, he wrote a lot, but Paul did appeal to removing mitzvot, and the non-Jews don't have to keep them, and so on and so forth. But it isn't Paul. The legend is the following, and it's all I can say is in the legend area, it's one of the stronger legends. There are sources that bring this down. Okay. Legend goes like this, that in the earliest period of the Christian religion, the Jews who had become Christians, this would be really early, were still in the synagogue. They had not identified themselves as a separate religion or people yet. As it turns out, in the Christian Bible, the word Christianity never appears, and the word Christian appears 3 times, but it's never used by a Christian. That might be telling that the earliest Christians, in fact, didn't call themselves Christians. That was a name people called them, and they adopted it, like Calvinists didn't choose that name, and Methodists didn't choose that name. Others chose it for them. The Quakers, so they adopted a name that was used about them. Okay. The key is that they were, at that early stage, it was no doctrine of the Trinity. If the church fathers are correct, the reason I say this is that these earliest Christian sects that were within the Jewish people left over no writings, or I'll rephrase that, none of their writings survived. So these groups would be identified like by the church fathers as Ebionites, perhaps Nazarenes. There is arguments over whether that's the same group, but the church fathers talk about groups that did not believe in a virgin birth, certainly didn't believe Jesus was God. Many of them believed that parts of Matthew were that was the gospel they followed. They certainly did not like Paul. And as we could definitely be certain, this you can take to the bank. These groups definitely existed because Paul opposed them and couldn't stand them. And in fact, one of Paul's chief roles of all of his letters, when Paul wrote his letters, he didn't think he was writing a Bible. He was writing letters to churches or individuals, but he was fighting with others about what the proper Christology was, or in some cases how churches should be run. But Paul was fighting with people, and he was angry as could be at fellow Christians. Who were they? Likely these groups. So the earliest Christians certainly didn't believe Jesus was God. They didn't believe he was born of a virgin. But one caveat is that all of our sources for what they believe come from their opponents. So everything has to be, but as I explained, Paul's letters, like the opening passage of Galatians 3, after 2 chapters of Paul explaining to everybody why he's right and everyone else is wrong, and his revelation doesn't come from Jerusalem, it comes directly from Jesus Christ. Now, you idiot Galatians, who bewitched you to believe that you have to keep the Torah? Okay? So Paul's chief enemies are not religious Jews like me who are not Christian, but really fellow Christians. Remember what I explained to you about that term. So legend has it that this person named Simon, who gets the name Peter, Matthew 16, was really a religious Jew. And he was asked by Sanhedrin to get this sect away from the Jewish people because it was metastasizing. It was simply dangerous. Let's move it out of the synagogue and let's just get it to Rome. Just get it somewhere else because this thing is very, very contagious, very, very dangerous. Legend has it that this individual asked, but if I do such a thing and join them or pretend to join them, wouldn't that affect my place in the world to come? So there was a very famous Tana, a very famous rabbi. Tana means that people lived in the 1st century BC, 1st century, 2nd century. These are the authors of the Mishnah, so it's a very early period. There was a man whose name is Shmuel HaKatan, which means the lesser Samuel. It means there was the great Samuel who was the prophet judge, but he was known to have Ruach HaKodesh. He had divine inspiration. He is most famous for writing the 19th benediction of the Shmon Esrei, which literally means the 18th benediction. But the benediction against the heretics, the Minim, was authored by him, inserted by him, against those who are from the inside destroying us. And very destructive, and their efforts should be immediately thwarted. It's a prayer we say, he's the author. And therefore, it would stand to reason that he would be the only person who could turn to Shimon and say to him, I assure you a place in the world to come. This is how the legend goes. And so when Shimon, to move the church to the center of Christianity from Jerusalem to Rome. Now, I can leave it there and leave you wondering, what. But there is one point I want to share with you, which I've never shared before. And that is Peter in the Christian Bible. Peter is a very intriguing individual in the New Testament, in that, in some ways, he's portrayed as a chief disciple. Matthew 16 famously, that he is the rock upon which the church is built. The Roman Catholic Church uses this passage, famous passage, to say that this is an allusion to the Bishop of Rome being the Pope and so on, the authority of the Pope. So in that, or he's present at the, when Jesus is on the Transfiguration, which you find in the Synoptic Gospels only. So he's present in that. So he's very much front and center as a chief apostle, right? But in another way, in the Christian Bible, which is very strange, there's no one else like this, he is portrayed as the chief schlemazel of the New Testament, always messing up, always getting into trouble. And there's no one else like this. So there's something odd, there's something striking about Peter in the Christian Bible that you could not apply to anyone else, whereas in one sense he is held up as a leading apostle, or the lead apostle in many ways. You see that also in the Passion narrative, that he's running to the tomb in John chapter 20. He's right there, front and center. But on the other hand, he's a mess. He's constantly messing up everything. When in the same chapter, Matthew 16, when Jesus says that he's going to have to suffer many things and be handed over, and he's going to be killed and rise on the third day, Peter throws a fit. Apparently, Peter doesn't know a thing about Isaiah 53 or Daniel 9, and Peter says, Lord, be that far from you. And Jesus says to him, "Get away from me, you Satan." So he's called a devil. So what's going on here? Moreover, more crazy, we are taught. Now, I'm sure if you would have been there with a video camera, you would this would not be recorded. It means this is not historical, but this is rather how Christians would look at these legends that had developed during the first century and record them, because all the Gospels were written in the second half of the first century. The book of Mark, earliest, certainly no earlier than 70. I think Mark was probably more likely 75, but regardless. So these stories had developed, and people, Matthew and Luke, are borrowing from Mark, blah, blah, blah. The key point is this, that you have, for another example, is Matthew 26, where Jesus says to Peter, you're going to deny me. And Peter, I'll never deny you. I'll give my life for you. No, you're going to deny me. It's Matthew chapter 26, verse 35, right? And Jesus was rebuking him. No, you're a mess. You are going to mess up at the critical juncture. When I die, you're going to deny that you had anything to do with me, okay? And there are different versions of this, but basically, you're going to deny me 3 times. Well, why is he denying him? I thought he's the best apostle. He's the chief apostle. Why would he deny him? You were there at the Transfiguration. Why? And moreover, in the book of Acts, Peter doesn't get it. Paul does. Peter is the schlemazel. He's messing up in the book of Acts. He doesn't get it. He's fighting with God. A sheet is coming down from heaven with unclean animals. A voice comes out, says, kill it, eat it. And Peter's but they're not kosher. And he's fighting around. So Peter's wrong. He's wrong on things. He's messing up. He's called a hypocrite by Paul in the book of Galatians, where Paul says in Antioch, I told Peter to his face that he's the biggest hypocrite in the world because he wouldn't eat with Gentiles. It's insane. So I want to add on to this as an addendum, which is very intriguing. And that is that Peter is not like other people in the Christian Bible, because he's either portrayed in a highly elevated status, which the Roman Catholic Church is going to run with, and all Christian denominations consider Peter unique. They don't, outside the Roman Catholic Church, no other Christian believes in the papacy, but they still hold Peter was certainly a lead apostle. But he's also portrayed as the lead schlemazel, the lead mess, the lead schlemiel in the Christian Bible, where he always is getting everything wrong. Now, the question is why? This is very intriguing to New Testament scholars. Why does he come off very complicated? It's possible that these 2 points are in fact related. As I said, the story is legendary. There's even a belief in the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, by the laws of fast days, that there's actually a day assigned for Peter's death, to fast on that day. Now, the text itself doesn't say that. Text says we don't know why this day in the month of Teves we fast. It says we don't know. But really, that's a wink. It's a dog whistle. And the commentators in the back say it's really talking about Shimon. You'll see Rav Lebovich, who was a commentator on the Shulchan Aruch, says he saw something with his own eyes that he can attest to this. So just know this is not some weird legend. But I've thought about this a lot, because it's one of the things that smack you in the face, is that Peter is portrayed in a contradictory fashion. On one hand, he's the lead apostle. On the other hand, he's the biggest mess in the world. And both of them are going on at the same time. And how Christians work it through, it's challenging. But most Christians see each piece separately. And Peter, certainly in the book of Acts, we're introduced to first. He's the contrast to Paul. Paul, who occupies the last 2/3 of the book of Acts, once Paul converts to Christianity, Paul gets nothing wrong. Paul is right there. Paul, once he becomes a Christian and his putative vision that he had with Jesus on the road to Damascus comes up 3 times in the book of Acts. They contradict each other a little bit. That's not important. What is important is once Paul undergoes a conversion, Paul could do nothing wrong. That cannot be said about Peter in the Christian Bible. And it may be because Peter really was infiltrating the church. Again, this is legend, but it would be consistent with a complex or contradictory character that comes to us through the Christian Bible. Thank you so much for your thoughtful question. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא עת נעשה בחפצו כל